And here's another little pre-take of What Your Palate. Hope you guys enjoy the full show. We have a special guest, Elizabeth Vianna from Chimney Rock. She's a winemaker. And I just got to ask real quick, how does a Brazilian-born female become a winemaker for a great estate in Napa Valley?
A lot of luck, hard work, and fearlessness.
I'd say fearlessness, that is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
We talk about a lot of interesting stuff. Winery pranks, wastewater.
Wastewater, septic systems.
Stuff.
Yeah, it's
So
a thing.
romantic,
It's a
sexy.
thing.
And we talk about winemakers and Psalms.
And who could forget the Big Apple?
You'll see this. She already knows that you pick on me, dude. we talked about it.
So we've been friends for a long time, like childhood friends.
Yeah.
And he went through his period of like he moved to L.A. and New York and whatever, and kind of picked up like the qualities along the way. But then he came back to Napa. We had to try to keep him like grounded.
Have you ever moved out of California?
I lived in Mexico.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah, we could talk
in
about
Colorado.
that.
About a year. Yeah, it was good. It was. I mean, it wasn't like vacation.
Well,
I was farming table grapes down there.
Did you live in a motorhome?
So-
I lived in a motorhome in
Wow.
Mexico. Yeah, it was
Wow.
like it was a great experience. And then came
Wow.
back up here, and that's when I started doing wine, grapes, and wine.
Don't you have like a good emptying out like the tank?
Yeah, when you plug one of those lines in the septic system in a motorhome, so I went and got like a spray suit on,
Right.
and because that was like the only thing I could find, and I like using the valve and everything couldn't couldn't get it to release, and so I had to take the whole thing off,
Right.
and so I get a hanger, and I'm like just trying to snake it, and I'm like just ready to slam that valve down because it's one of those gate valves that you just
Right.
push in, and finally dislodged it, and I don't know how many gallons. I think it's like a 150-gallon tank, and I don't know if it was like 5 or 10 gallons just came rushing out
Oh my God.
of just stale, like not fermented, but like
Right.
it was just unprocessed shit water,
Oh.
and it got
I'm
all
so
over
sorry.
me. It was The spray suit did a decent job, but it was bad enough where I mean it was all over my face, and
Yeah.
I had goggles on,
Wow.
and my mouth was closed.
Well, good thing that was before the Instagram time.
Yeah.
Hey Elizabeth, welcome to Go With Your Palate.
Yeah. Here we go. All right. We got another episode. I'm Joe Wagner. We got Chris Fat Mario Rubio. We got another episode of Go With Your Palate where we talk about
Wine.
entrepreneurship and
Whatever the FLs.
whatever you can say F in the real long
fuck?
form. Fuck. It's the same amount of
Well, whatever
syllables.
Okay.
And today we got a special
Fuck.
guest. Today we got a special guest. Elizabeth Vianna. She's the winemaker from Chimney Rock. She's got a huge history in wine. We can't wait to hear about it. Got a couple of your wines up here, one of which I've never tried. But welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Very cool.
Well, great. Well, I don't know where we want to get started. I know we just started talking about shit water, so
I know. I'm glad she's still sitting here.
I know.
It's like, okay, you guys asked me as a guest.
Yeah.
Now you guys started. But
well, as winemakers, you also need
Yes.
to know how to operate a septic system or a wastewater treatment system.
Oh, there's so many skills I've
It's
acquired I never imagined. Yeah.
And so, actually, this is a fun place. We've never talked about this on the podcast. So, I look at our wastewater treatment system as a year-round fermentation,
Right.
right? Making sure you got the proper bacteria, right? You're feeding it properly. You're ramping up for harvest. You throw some dog food in there,
Right.
like whatever. Like, there's all these little tricks. Do you manage the wastewater treatment system?
I manage our ponds. I manage the septic, the whole thing. And this is the stuff they don't teach you at Davis,
Yeah.
right? Like you go figure it out.
That's it. Yeah, a lot of it's trial and error, and it's one of those things like you gain wisdom in how over time
It's so
and how to treat
true.
these things.
Yeah.
And I find that part fascinating. I think a lot of people don't realize that wastewater treatment is like an integral part of what we do on the wine side, because you can't just get rid of your wastewater, and it oftentimes can be a type of effluent that is difficult to process because you're dealing with alcohol, you're dealing with heavy solids like lees,
Right.
you're dealing with having to do separation or like all through the process.
Sustainability 101, right?
Yeah.
Like who knew?
And then the goal is to reuse that water,
Right.
which we've come so far in. I think as an industry, but I think in particular our state here in California,
Right.
in being able to reuse that water, whether it's in the vineyard or even in some cases I've seen people are using it as spray down water, that sort of thing. Not using it in processing, but using it as spray down in facilities. I'm not sure how I feel about that just yet. What are your thoughts?
Well, Chimney Rock's even better. Get this. We were a golf course 45 years ago. So we actually had a contract with the town of Yountville for recycled water. So we get gray water from the town of Yountville. There's a pipeline of gray water that comes down and feeds into our pond, and that's what we use for irrigation.
Oh, that's awesome.
And frost control and all that stuff.
Wow.
So
they do all the treatment.
They do the treatment, and I have to deal with some of the reporting and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's and it's long-term contract, no limits on water, which is cool.
That is great. That's something you don't get nowadays.
Yeah.
And I know Carneros as well from Napa Sanitation District. A lot of Carneros is on treated wastewater for irrigation.
Yeah.
And so it's a great use of it, right? You're not
It is
pulling out of the aquifer, and it's all treated. So technically, I think you could drink it and not get sick. They don't recommend it.
I wouldn't. Yeah.
I wouldn't.
I don't even like when my lab jumps in the ponds. I'm like, oh no.
All right, we jump straight into year-round fermentations on wastewater. So let's. But you also touched on, because I did want to talk about this, Chimney Rock. When I was growing up behind or around that winery, which is a beautiful winery in Stag's Leap, it used to be a golf course, and we look at Stag's Leap now as one of the preeminent, best areas in the valley, most exclusive areas to grow grapes.
Right.
And so, do you know much about that thought process? Obviously, golf, I don't know if that was a successful endeavor from those owners, but the thought process of we have all this land in one of the best areas in the world for Cabernet, and we're golfing on it like that.
Yeah. Well, it was right after the Paris tasting of '76 that the Wilsons came in and found that property. So they pulled out the first 9 holes, and they were respectful. They left 9 holes, so it continued to be a working golf course right up until, I want to say, 1999. I was an intern at Chimney Rock in 1999, and it was still a half golf course, still had the clubhouse. Makes better Cabernet than it did a golf course, from what I understand.
Yeah.
It was kind of a mediocre, but people loved it, right? It was part of...
So it was part of Chimney Rock, though?
It was the Chimney Rock Golf Course.
And there was a private club there as well?
It wasn't private. It was a public course, right?
Okay, you just pay to go.
Yeah, you just pay to go and go have a sandwich, go golf, hang out for the day, whatever, yeah. So we still find golf balls out there. I feel like this is true. We've actually named one of our vineyards is called White Pebble in honor of all the white golf balls we still find. Yeah, it's true.
Whoa.
Spirit of golf lives.
So biodegradable golf balls, maybe they still don't exist.
They don't. Clearly. Yeah.
The White Pebble, that's great.
I don't know, but there's a business there, isn't there? Can you collect all these balls, watch them, clean them, and then just turn them?
Yeah. I just keep them for good luck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Little,
just keep a giant
relics.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
And so was there pushback from the community when it was?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I mean, in Napa County, we have a long-standing history of people telling landowners what to do with their land.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of pushback on that right now. I don't know.
Listen, you never make everybody happy. I'm sure somebody was
Yeah.
unhappy about it.
Yeah.
And I've had a few golfers come in and say, I used to golf in that course. Why did you take it away? But you're here to sample Cabernet, sir.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Now that you've retired.
Yeah.
Look what we did with it. Well, why don't you walk us through a little bit of your history? Because you lived in Brazil for much of your formative years.
Yeah.
And I just want to know kind of what your childhood was like, what the spark was for wine. Because I think a lot of people don't. They think about wine as it's the barrier to entry is quite hard or high, right? So, but then you also look at the success stories and the people that just had a raw passion for it and have been successful becoming winemakers, starting their own brands, whatever it is. And a lot of them, both humble beginnings or, if you're a server in a restaurant, I use Costa Brown as an example a lot because those guys just started in their garage screwing around. They loved what they did, and then all of a sudden they had a business on their hands.
Right.
So what was that upbringing like, and what was the spark?
Yeah, crazy journey to wine. I was born in Brazil, actually.
Okay.
So my father's Brazilian, my mother's from El Salvador. So child of 3 countries. My dad loved fine wine and wasn't a collector, wasn't serious about it, but definitely enjoyed wine at the table. And even as kids, he would share with us. He would say, taste this. And I, we didn't really think about it. I think it was his goal to make it not a taboo thing.
Yeah, so normalize it in the household.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So let's see. Dad's was a chemical engineer. My first love was music. I thought I was going to be a musician at first. And then I fell in love with science and thought I really wanted to do something for the world. So wanted to be a doctor then. So was pre-med at Vassar, and kind of grew up going back and forth between Brazil and the U.S. So 0 to 3 Brazil, 8 to 16 U.S. No, 8 to 16 Brazil.
Yeah.
0 to 3 Brazil. Oh my God.
4 to 7.
3 to 8 here.
Okay.
And 8 to 16 Brazil.
Okay.
Sorry.
That sounds like a great
Yeah.
balance. I mean, God, talk
and
about...
1 year in El Salvador somewhere in there, which is crazy. You know what? As a kid, it sucked, right? Like you're moving schools all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
It's like you're having to readjust. But now I look back and I'm like, I'm grateful,
Yeah.
right? Because it's the kind of experience that makes you be able to swim in any pond.
Yeah.
Right? Throw me anywhere,
Yeah.
I can swim,
Yeah, that's awesome.
And we grew up with 3 languages and really garnered, like, I think, a love of travel and really just relish different cultures, like, because I grew up between 3 of them.
Yeah.
So not a bad backdrop.
Yeah, that's
in
that.
the end,
That sounds like a recipe for success.
Yeah.
You know, I think when kids have it very comfortable and easy all their life, it's kind of like they don't understand how to approach challenges, right?
Right.
And when you have that level of, like, I mean, not just adjustment in your life, but also the cultural experiences that are
Yeah.
like so. I can imagine Brazil and El Salvador being completely different than the U.S.
Absolutely.
I've never been to either of those countries.
Oh, you got to go.
Yeah, I've
gotta
been to
go.
Argentina a few times, passed through Brazil, but didn't get to see
Yeah,
the culture. So,
yeah.
what's your favorite food in Brazil?
What is my
Yeah.
favorite food in Brazil? Probably good old rice and black beans,
Okay.
feijoada. It's like traditional. It's hearty. Yeah. Brazilian food is probably not my favorite of
Okay.
all the ethnic foods, but
Yeah.
A lot of meat. A lot
Yeah.
of cattle there, so a lot of barbecue, Brazilian barbecue. Churrascarias, right?
Yep.
Where you go and the little red thing and the green thing,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
eat
The-
pounds of meat.
So, is that a thing in Brazil?
It is. It
That
actually
really?
is.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
Okay, because I figured that they probably just Americanized it, kind of like they did sushi.
It's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely Americanized.
Yeah.
Like, I think they take some creative liberty in what goes around the table. Like, I think Brazil churrasco is a little more specific to
Yeah.
certain cuts of meat or whatever, but it's fine. It's a good representation.
Yeah, well, good. That's
Yeah.
good to hear because I
Yeah.
mean, we do business with some of those Brazilian steakhouses and
Yeah.
love what they do, and I
Yeah.
love the experience. My kids love the experience because especially when they're teenage boys, it's just like green card up the whole time.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
like, you better get that $55 worth.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what do you think about Gil Pau Gaucho in Napa?
I love it. I take my guys love it.
Yeah.
That's our standard end of harvest celebration.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
take them there and they just leave the green thing up and just eat a ton of food after harvest.
I thought they did a very good job with that
Yeah,
place, which
yeah.
used to be a Marie Callender's.
That's right.
right.
I remember that.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if
that.
people know what Marie Callender's was, but it was like
It's pies.
it was
right?
a pie shop.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was kind of like a diner pie shop. It was
Yeah.
like a glorified Denny's with a pie shop in the front. And so they rehabbed this whole place and turned it into this like swanky dark steakhouse and great buffet and then all the meat you can eat. So that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, so what was the inspiration for wine? Obviously, around the
Yeah.
table, your dad giving you little nips every now
Yeah.
and then, and you
Yeah,
find
so I
yourself
go
at
to
Vassar.
college, right? I do my pre-med thing, and I decide that I want to move to New York because I'm obsessed with New York City. I want to live there at some point. I don't know why I had this calling. So I moved to New York City with 2 of my best college buddies right after college, get a job in a hospital, decide I'm going to work for a while, sow my wild oats, just enjoy the city. And in that time, a really good buddy of mine from Vassar, his dad was a Wall Street guy, had collected Bordeaux's in the 70s, wasn't drinking anymore, was like, hey kids, enjoy some wines. So my friend Roy would show up with these bags of wines, like to my little studio apartment, and it would be like Figeac, Latour, Mouton from the 70s, which she had paid no money for back in the day. And I just fell in love with these wines. I was like, and it's funny, I wasn't even thinking about production, but aesthetically, like the experience of these older wines that kept changing in the glass, and that, I don't know, there was just so much there. And I'm kind of obsessed with all things aesthetics, whether it's words or music or art, like, and wine felt that way to me. It felt like I felt an emotional reaction to those things, right? To these wines.
Yeah, that's a good and I think common feeling that I think people they have with it, and learning it's from the earth. It's us trying to maximize Mother Nature and convey it in a bottle and carry it forward. It's a time capsule.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
So just started drinking more and going to every tasting that I could go to. Literally, I fell in love with wine as a consumer, and started reading got my Spectator, started reading my Wine Spectator. I remember Caymus was one of the big brands back in the day. In
back
New
in the
York,
90s.
Like Special Select was like the,
one of the jewels of Napa Valley.
Yeah, and in fact, New York is very Eurocentric, and it's I would say. And so there were a few brands that were big there from Napa at the time. This is early 90s, I think, for me. And went to a tasting at Sotheby's, like a pre-auction tasting. I was like literally trying to make my way into anything, and where you could pay little money and try some cool wines. And Christian Weck spoke, and he talked about going to Davis when he inherited pictures, because that's what you do, right? And so,
when you inherit pictures. I guess that's what you do.
Because he was young, he didn't know anything, and he needed to learn, right, to learn the craft. So called Davis the next day, got an application mailed, because nothing was online back then, and put it in a drawer, and was like, that's crazy. This is crazy. You can't do this. You're going to med school. I had brunch with one of my best friends who's in the film industry that Sunday at the Soho Grand. I'll never forget this. And I was like, I have this crazy idea, John. I'm thinking about going to winemaking school instead of medicine. I'm really in love with this thing. I think this could be me. And he's like, it is you. You have to do it. And I was like, I'm going to wait a year. Let me wait a year and really see if this is real. He's like, don't wait a year. If you wait a year, you won't do it. So I applied, got in, and that was it.
And just moved across the country?
Packed. I had 3 cats at the time. I was a cat lady. And moved with my 3 cats
An evolving
to
cat lady.
Davis. Yes, no longer. Now a dog lady.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
God. Yeah.
Switched over to the good side.
Yeah. So, went to Davis. And this is kind of crazy. I had stepped foot in 2 wineries at that point in my life. These 2 little wineries in New Mexico when I'd been on a road trip with a friend of mine there. Had never been inside a winery. Had no idea what production actually meant.
Yeah.
Like, I really was coming from a consumer place. And it could have been a big mistake, now when I look back at it. It's like, wow, you really took a gamble. You're crazy in your 20s, right?
Yeah.
But it just never looked back. Loved the industry. Loved Davis. Was amazing. An amazing experience. And my first internship was at Trefethen in 98 when I was a grad student. And I still remember the first day. I'm like up on a catwalk, like hooking up hoses to a pump, and there's like a red-tailed hawk flying above. I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible.
And now you get to be outside almost every day of your life.
Yeah.
In the cellar or outside?
And it was terrifying at the same time. It was like hooking up hoses to a pump. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So it's what's interesting is about Davis, right? So Davis has a great reputation, but it also has more of a reputation of being research based than it does. I don't want to say applicable skills,
which is true.
Yeah, but I know they teach some of that. I mean, I didn't do the program, but I've gone through the whole place a couple times, and they have a great setup. So your evolution from coming out of a very structured program like that is kind of like more in the box of the theory of winemaking.
Right.
How did you evolve? Did you have somebody inspire you to evolve outside of that to have your own kind of creative? Obviously, you're a creative person on your own with your music, love for art, and culture. How did you, or what was it that had you evolve into really allowing yourself to get outside the box?
Yeah, so Napa Wine Company. That was my first
yeah.
job out. So
Yeah.
I went from, I call, Davis was university number 1, Napa Wine Company was university number 2, right? And it was because there were like 30 different winemakers making wine under the same roof. They all did different things. And it was everything from like, we were bottling like Coppola, Diamond Series, right? So a wide range of price points
the
to
highest
like
end to
Heidi
your-
Barrett, to
yeah.
Celia Welch, Paul Meyer was made there, Nickel was made there, Staglin was there. So that was the university of the actual doing. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways of making great wine, and there's wine for everyone, and also having these amazing female role models, right, who kind of helped build, I think, my confidence around tasting. Like they'd be doing trials, blending trials. They'd be like, "Come over, Elizabeth, taste."
Yeah.
You know, so that was great. And the only part that I didn't get there was the vineyard part. This is really winemaking. I started as lab director,
Okay.
but then Chimney Rock gave me that education. So when I
On the
got to
vineyard
Chimney
side.
Rock, you know, because
Yeah.
we grow everything right there.
We got some great role models at Napa Wine Co. And Napa Wine Co. A lot of people don't know it. They're the incubator or the kind of the foundation of a lot of the finest wines that have hit the market over the last 30 years. And so I mean you're saying Heidi Barrett. Who else was on that team?
So Pam Starr was making
Pam
her
Starr,
wines
okay.
there. Celia Welch, Randy Mason was making wines there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
John McKay, yeah, he was actually making the Napa Wine Company wines. Christy Coford is still there. She's a great winemaker. Who else is there? Karen Culler was there.
Oh, okay.
Even Kim Nichols from Markham was making some stuff over there. I met her back in that day. I mean, a lot.
Yeah, you got the full spectrum of. I mean there you go. That's how you become a good winemaker.
Yeah.
Formal trained, and then massive diversity in application
Yeah.
of the processes.
Yeah, and I worked so hard my 2 years there. I mean, I had no life. You know, it was because we were probably crushing 2,000 tons a year, and then bottling probably 1 million cases a year in total
Jeez.
with all those projects. And I loved it, though. It was so amazing.
Isn't it fun just
Yeah.
to wake up in the morning before the sun comes up and then
Yeah.
you work all day?
It was the best.
Yeah.
It was the best use of my time. And the funny thing is, when I interviewed there, it's an old facility. I don't know if you've been there.
Yes.
It's like
Yep.
it's kind of this hodgepodge, and
Got the old
I
beer
remember
tanks in
going
the back.
for my interview and being like, "Oh my God, I don't think I would ever make my wine here." Like here's a little snooty Davis grad,
Yeah.
who thinks they know everything, right? And I remember going to lunch with Doug Fletcher, who had been my mentor at Chimney Rock, and saying, "Hey, I have this opportunity at Napa Wine Company, but it's really not what I envisioned." I wanted to go work for some small high-end producer, of course. And he was like, "You'd be a moron not to take it, Elizabeth. You have to do it. This will be great for you."
Yeah.
And so I did.
And speaking to the Davis program, because I think you mentioned, so was the graduating class approximately 13 people that you came out of there with?
It was, yeah. I'm trying to think who was in my class. Robbie Meyer, Sally Johnson, Sally Johnson Blum, who was
Yeah.
at Pride for many years and is consulting now. Who else was in my class? It was a good class. Matt Rorick was in school with us.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I know the program's grown, but they're only 13. And
The
Robbie
grad
Myers.
students, because at that point there was already an undergrad program, and that was a little bit bigger.
Okay.
Right? That
Okay.
probably took like 30, 40 students. But
Got
the
it.
master's students was about 12.
Okay.
And not everybody in my class even stayed in wine. Some people did. Some people eventually left.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, that's what I was.
Well, so, Rick Foreman.
Yeah.
So he graduated, I think he graduated in like the early 60s from Davis
Right.
with a master's in chemical engineering or something, or some form of chemistry.
Right.
All of his friends are going to like petrochemical companies to tire brands, whatever. And he's like, I'm going to work for Sterling. And so they were all like, you're crazy. This is like, there's no future. Why would you waste all this education? And now, he just fell in love with wine, and it's, not too dissimilar of a story. They didn't have a program at Davis at the time, but I just love hearing stuff like that where it's like you took a risk. I mean, I think it was like 66 was his first vintage. Yeah. And I mean, that was way before Napa Valley was a thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, there's still the opportunity out there if you got the passion and the drive.
Yeah.
And then just take that chance.
And you're a little fearless, Just be a little fearless.
I've oftentimes thought that's people overthink, right?
Yeah.
It's like get 60% of the data in your favor, and then the rest is gut feel.
Yeah.
And there are so many people who are like, I gotta wait till I got 80, 90%, like feeling good about it, but then the opportunity is passed.
Yeah.
Or you either just come up with something different. But
I mean, being risk averse is not a good thing sometimes. Sometimes you have to take the chance,
especially in your youth.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know. I'm worried about the youngest generation that like right now how they live in such a bubble of not their lifestyle doesn't include a lot of risk. Like it's gonna like get out in the street and play all day. It's like no. I want you to be safe. You're going to play video games all day. And
well, the post-pandemic era is an interesting time, I think. For kids, they got some rough. We were able to be more risk-free. It was safer to be in the streets. It was safer to, it was different.
Absolutely, it was safer. I mean, we live in a safe place here, at least in Napa Valley. I know there are some areas in Bay Area that can get a little dicey, but overall, I still feel I like to hear stories when like somebody's kid got hurt. Well, what were they doing? It's like good, they were outside. You broke your wrist because you were you built a ramp in your in your street. Like,
yeah. Well, you did have we talked about it on a previous podcast, but even with the story with one of your kids who had the motorcycle accident.
Yeah,
he was. And it was a crazy time for you at that time, right? With the helicopter being lifted and everything like that.
But he was fine. Like turned out to be fine. Just big concussion and whatever else. But like it's stuff like that where you're like, well, would I have changed what was being done? It's like everything was properly done. He had the safety gear, all that. But then you're like, I just like number one, don't want him to be scared of doing that again. He's still recovering, but I think it's like 2 weeks out and he's probably going to be able to get back on a bike. And I'm like, all right, well,
chalk it all up to experience.
He's still outside with his friends and running around, and you know what I mean. And I know you still take the precautions medically and stuff like that, but at the same time, I know you know the importance of also kind of dusting yourself off and getting back out there and not creating some kind of fear that will prevent him from ever riding again or something.
So anybody listening who's going to medical school, if you don't want to cut somebody open for the rest of your life and you like drinking wine, there's still an opportunity out there. You could just ditch that, transfer.
There are other ways of curing people out there.
Yeah. And I think we get asked a lot of times to people from different walks of life that have that kind of get this yearning for the wine world, and they're just, how do I do it? I wasn't born into it, and they're doing something completely different. And that's why I think your story is so magical. You already described even your time kind of going back and forth between schools, countries, that how hard that could have been on as a kid, but what you actually gained from that and being able to be adaptable in different environments and everything.
And comfortable taking those risks.
Yes.
That's, I think, the big thing.
And I was wondering if there's anything that you can attribute that you brought from, because I lived in New York for a while too, loved it, and anything that you took from from that transition when you went to wine, that East Coast to West Coast.
You mean East Coast? East Coast to Best Coast.
I
think just want to make sure we're
I
clear on
can't
that.
live without either coast. Yeah. I need those two coasts in my life. Absolutely. So I think New York made me even more fearless.
Yeah.
I would actually say that before I went to college, I was probably an introvert, because it had to adjust to a lot of. College started to cure me of that. Not that it's bad to be an introvert at all, but I think I was a little afraid, right? And New York, having to conquer that city, and it was a great situation because you go in with your two college besties, so you're not alone, right? And we all got different kinds of jobs. One of us was in fundraising. The other one was going to go to med school. I was going to go to med school too. But you build a whole new social circle. I mean, my time in New York City, I met people in every industry, from like fashion to film, and got involved in so many different things. And you know, it's that ever stimulating, inspiring city too. Like, there's always something amazing to do.
It is the modern Rome. I mean, it is the center of the world, the center of the universe. I mean, I think it still is.
Oh, I totally
Everything
agree.
is there.
I totally agree. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by it still. And I get to go there once a year usually.
Yeah. And then suddenly, it's funny. So I lived there for a total of 7 years. I got distracted for quite a while.
Yeah.
And the city becomes small, you know? You know people everywhere. It becomes your neighborhood. And like, here was this thing I wanted to conquer, and you know, you did, and it's like, okay, let's go do something else now. But I love it. I love that city.
Do you get back there quite often then?
Not enough since the pandemic.
Yeah,
like, I used to go like two times a year. I had a rent controlled apartment. This is a true story. And I kept it for a few years, because it was like $500 a month.
And
like,
wow.
And so literally, like, I kept it while I was still a grad student, and then while I was still living here, and I like sublet it to friends, and then finally I was like, okay, karmically, it's now important for you to pass this on to a New Yorker who actually needs it. So I did, but I kept it for a while.
Did they maintain the same rent?
It could go up a certain amount once I gave up that lease, but it was still controlled.
Yeah.
So, but I was paying like $520.
It's crazy expensive. Well, everything is now, for that matter. It's not like, you know, it's wow, 500.
And what
it was on 70th and 1st, like a block away from the hospital that I worked at the time. Yeah.
So you're familiar with that area?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm familiar with that hospispital.
Yeah, between New York and First. Yeah.
I actually spent some time there.
God, did you?
No, I don't want to launch into my stomach issues.
Why don't you just say that you went to medical school for a little bit?
Yeah, I would. Thank you. Can we all say me? Edit that. I did some pre-med too.
Is this it? Is this familiar? No, it's probably on the other side of the street.
That's East 70th. Pharmacy.
Art brought up got the Google Maps going. We got Street View.
First between First. So it was 71st, actually. Yeah, between First and York. That's
Sorry, Art, you're one off.
I was one off. Yeah, nicely done.
Yeah, I do love Google Earth.
Yeah.
I've been like looking at properties on this. It's like super helpful.
I know, it's getting like...
All right, so you get back to the East Coast still. I agree with you. The pandemic really screwed things up. It was like 2 years where it was like, what's the point of going? And got back there last year. Actually got to bring one of my kids on a sales trip through the whole Northeast. And he was 17 at the time, and so he got to experience that side of the business. I want them to all kind of see the different... That's the beauty of the wine business, right? You got vineyard agriculture, you've got chemistry, artistry, industrial elements in production, then you got sales and marketing and all that comes along with the creative juices that drive that. And so getting them kind of to see that diversity is what my goal is. And so as they've reached their later teenage years, I'm like, all right, you're going on a sales trip. And so we went through New York, and I thought it was feeling like it was just really starting to come back. You know, and so felt really good about that. We're starting to see it, you know, continue to climb. It's churning, it's growing, and that's all great. But sales is integral and innate part of our business as winemakers. Sometimes I feel like I'm spending more time on sales than I do on winemaking.
So true.
Which can be a little frustrating, but, you know, it's part of the business. It's just like having to manage wastewater treatment systems and whatever else.
Exactly.
So you get out in the market a couple times a year. How many do you think?
3. It's been as much as 6 weeks a year. Pandemic kind of slowed things down, and I'm starting to ramp back up again. So.
And you see the benefit of that with, I mean, the authentic story, the wine quality, everything's got to hit on all cylinders, but you're undoubtedly, when you go into a market, you are going to sell more wine than a hired salesperson.
Yeah, and I think not only that, I think for the success of the brand, you spending time with salespeople on the ground so that they actually hear your stories directly from you it gives them a different connection to your brand, right? So it's not even just about seeing the buyers, but it's actually spending time with the folks who work at these distributors, right?
Yeah,
and who
the
are
reps.
pounding the pavement, like, and having like really great memories with them. Like, I think that's actually really important.
I totally agree. They get to know you personally, and
Yep.
There seems to be like, and this is, I think, all winemakers. There seems to be this the reps for distributors. They don't just kind of feel comfortable with you right away,
Right.
until you start talking to them, and they're like, "Oh wait, you're just a regular person."
You're a real person.
Yeah.
I know.
You get the same
exactly.
thing?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And probably not as much as you, but yeah.
No, I mean, I just like
Yeah.
get in a car and like start, just talking some shit about whatever, like just
Yeah.
just BSing, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay, this will be fun."
Oh, wow, you're down to earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never expected that.
Now,
Yeah.
now I think they can just check out an episode of the podcast too, and
Yeah.
just hear and talk
Yeah.
about. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just
exactly.
learned a lot about
it
him.
humanizes like that label,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For them in a way.
Well, before you walked in, I was told the whole team here, like, guys in the sound booth, everything was like, "All right, let's act like really staunch, like just really like not fun people." And Chris is like, "Don't fucking do this to me."
I feel like I'm like the one that gets nervous and
I
like,
know, he's
all stressed out.
That's hilarious.
Messes up with me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like,
Well, the cat was out of the bag because I talked to Chris yesterday.
okay.
and,
Yeah.
like,
I gave her.
I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be fun."
So we were talking to a company that provides this system, and so we had put them on. It was a Zoom, and we're in the winemaking lab, and they're in their office, and so we were talking about the pricing and whatever else, and so we were like, "Well, give us a second to talk about this," and so we muted, and the screen was still on, and so we talk about what we need to do for about 30 seconds, and the next minute we're like, "Okay, what are we gonna do to make it look like we're like pissed off?" We're like throwing papers, throw a chair on the ground, and so.
That's hilarious.
So we started doing and then we get back online, and we just started laughing. We couldn't hold it together. They're like, "Oh, we're just trying to fuck with you guys."
Yeah.
So yeah, you always you gotta have a little
You
bit.
have to have fun.
Yeah.
Life's too short.
Yep.
Do you have that at Chimney Rock? These kind of pranks or people kind of joking around, and because I feel like Joe, he brings that family part of him. He does this with his brother and his dad, and I feel like it comes into the company, keeps stuff interesting. I don't know.
Definitely.
Do you have a favorite prank that comes to mind?
Yeah.
A favorite prank.
Find out next week. Same time, same channel.